Hi, my name is Dr. Rona Halualani, and this is a slidecast that I've created for the University of Nebraska-Lincoln with regard to the diversity mapping project that we're undertaking for your campus. So what I thought I would do in this slidecast is to talk about the diversity mapping methodology, what we are going to be undertaking for you, and just explain what that process is really about. And keep in mind also that we conducted some Atlas diversity benchmarkings kind of over in the summer, and those findings were released to your campus, I believe, in early fall. And those were about kind of looking at your diversity efforts in relation to some of your designated peers. But let me go ahead and tell you just a little bit about who we are. I am the managing principal and founder, along with my brother, of Halualani and Associates, and that picture there is my home institution, that's San Jose State University. I have a PhD in intercultural communication and diversity from Arizona State. I am a proud faculty member of intercultural communication and diversity at San Jose State now for, that should be 18 years. This is my 18th year right now in the Department of Communication Studies. And the reason why I bring that up is because my area is in intercultural communication. So I've been trained in it, I specialize in it, I write in it, I teach in that area. And that really does connect to diversity mapping in a variety of ways. I also was the equivalent of a diversity leader at San Jose State University. I was also in charge of institutional planning from 2007 to 2009, and I reported directly to the president. And it was in that position that I really worked on diversity at the institutional level and at the strategic level. And my big task in that role, when they plucked me away from being a faculty member and I was an acting department chair at the time, was to create the first diversity master plan in the California State University system, which is a 23 campus system. And we did that in about 18 months. We created the first diversity master plan of that particular system, and there's kind of a link that shows that. Our firm is really just a small family-owned diversity analytics research and training firm. I represent a team of 4. We are a minority-owned business as well as a Native Hawaiian-owned organization. I'm very proud of that. And I guess the story behind it is that when I was an administrator for a few years, we developed a process called diversity mapping. I developed that with a few of my graduate students. And when we were doing that and we were about to finish with the plan, we were constantly being asked by other institutions who had heard about what we were doing if we would do it for them. And I think that's how this consulting, which happened just by accident because I'm ultimately a professor and a researcher, that's really how it happened. It was a very organic process. I'm proud to say that we have been in existence for the last 8 years. And I do this kind of work when I can, in terms of my time with regard to my faculty role. But we've mapped 48 institutions to date, including 2 university systems. The most recent university system that we just finished this past fall is Indiana University. We mapped 7 of their campuses. We did a number of mappings for them as well as benchmarking. And we also mapped Penn State University, and those were fantastic. But we've really mapped the gamut, the range of institutional types. 4-year publics, privates, research institutions, teaching institutions. We've mapped faith-based institutions, 2-year community colleges. We've had a really just nice range of campuses, colleges, and universities that we work with. So let me tell you a little bit about diversity mapping. If you look at these bullet points and you look at the top 4 in white bold font, those are typically the areas most people think about diversity in terms of kind of the highlights. Access issues and enrollment issues. It's the number one thing about how do we get a diversified student body. It will continue to be the number one issue, especially for institutions in certain parts of the country. Demographics, what's the nature of our community, our diverse community, students, faculty, staff, and administrators. Retention, completion, and graduation for me is a diversity issue. It always has been. And campus climate. So campus climate is really a subjective, it's an assessment of the subjective experience of your campus members. Their feeling of being included, their feeling of belonging, their feeling that they matter to the institution. So keep in mind that diversity mapping is not a campus climate instrument. It's more of an institutional analysis of your larger university actions in terms of diversity efforts, and I'll talk about that. My team, we're looking at the 3 bottom bullet points, which are bolded in orange, which are institutional actions and strategies, the institutional commitment and diversity with regard to diversity, investment with regard to diversity, and looking also at diversity as a knowledge domain or as a learning outcome. It's not just the who, but it's also the what. It's the perspectives that we are proffering to our students, that we're engaging them, as well as to the entire community, staff members, employees, faculty, and administrators. Diversity mapping for us is similar to asset mapping in the sense that it looks at the resources that an institution has, as well as, the challenges, the limits, maybe the gap areas, maybe the areas that an institution has not really paid that much attention to. And the reason why we're interested in diversity mapping is because, as in the orange bold points, is that we really want to know what an institution has done with regard to diversity as opposed to what they just say they've done with regard to diversity. And let me tell you a little bit of a story is when we were trying to set out to create the first diversity master plan in the CSU system in California, I mean, we were the campus that had no new money. We were the campus that kind of reinvented the wheel every year, which really just shot down our morale amongst our students, our employees, our faculty, our staff members. And we just didn't really know what we had going for us and what is it that we've done. In addition to it, we would find out things about diversity programs, and don't forget you have to go see this person about this diversity scholarship. And then we would go and find that person on our campus or look for the person. And lo and behold, that person was gone. They had retired or they had moved to a different institution, and that particular effort had also gone with them, and no one had taken that up, because oftentimes diversity efforts are run by individuals who are these amazing superheroes who take it upon themselves to do it for the campus, and when they leave, those efforts disappear and go with them, which is not a very sustainable effort. So that's when we said, okay, let's go ahead and just map out everything San Jose State has done in the last 10 years with regard to anything to do with diversity, culture, inclusion, inclusive excellence, all of it. And that's what we did. We ended up mapping about 10 years worth of efforts, as well as all of the courses across the catalog, to really see what we had going for us, that we then knew, like, let's pick these as our goal areas for our diversity strategic plan, because these are areas that we've done some work in, but we have a little bit more leverage in, and we've done some things where we haven't paid as much attention to. So maybe those should be some goal areas. My point being that kind of an exercise, this kind of a research kind of sense of analysis, isn't just for research's sake. It's really to build into future strategic action. So we want to identify UNL's current resources, strengths, and your institutional behaviors and routines, your patterns that you've done in the last 5 years with regard to diversity and inclusion. And we're only doing this kind of work with the hopes that it helps you craft a diversity kind of strategy for the future. And we also hope that it opens up conversation points, decisions that you need to make together as a campus, and also to facilitate really significant discussions that need to happen in the academy and in your community. So we've written about diversity mapping in the Journal of Higher Education Policy and Management, as well as with Dr. Sylvia Hurtado, who does amazing work on campus climate and college completion, for the Association of American Colleges and Universities, Diversity and Democracy. And I have sent those links so that you can take a look at those. We are going to delineate the actual diversity efforts that you've engaged in, not what was said you had done, but that we actually can go back into the evidence and see that UNL has actually completed. We're going to look at all the diversity efforts, structures, strategies, roles, efforts, programs, and courses. And it allows us to take stock of what's currently going on, what's been your most recent history with regard to diversity, but it's kind of that before shot. It's that baseline. It's that before shot before you start that exercise program, before you start that cleanse, right? Whatever the goal is. And, you easily could go and create your own spreadsheet of everything you've done or an inventory. But for us, what makes diversity mapping extra special is that we take all of those individual efforts and we analyze them in 25 different ways. And keep in mind, I'm constantly adding to those 25 analytical layers. So we actually, I think, have close to 30 now. But what that means is we take every individual effort, we hold it up to the light, so to speak, and we look at it in 20 different angles, 25 different angles. Who's the effort about? What's it for? What's the definitions of diversity being captured in here? What was the commitment behind it? Is it an effort? Is it an event? Is it a scholarship program? Who's it for? How long of an effort was it? How many years? Was it a one-shot deal? Was it multiple years? All of these different kinds of questions that we can pull out as much meaning as possible. And we're looking for things that you do well. I mean, I come from a university system where there's never a lot of money or new money for that matter. That's just the state of public higher ed in California. And the same may be true in Nebraska. But for us, we've had to learn really ever since I started my academic life to repurpose, to use what we currently have, to leverage what we're really good at without having these really expensive initiatives. And so for us, we hope that the mapping helps in that area is to identify, did you know that UNL is really, really quite strong in this particular area of diversity that then can be leveraged in a really particular way. We also will be looking at the things that maybe have not been paid attention to, or we refer to those as empty zones, but we are not pessimists at Halualani and Associates. We see empty zones as opportunities for future action, and we're really, really positive about those. We are going to be looking at efforts, and I'll explain what those are in a minute. All of the diversity courses, not just the usual suspects. Like I teach intercultural communication, which is an upper division GE course at my university. We're not going to be doing just those. We want to look at every course in every department across every discipline, undergraduate and graduate, as well as general education diversity requirements. We're going to do a 5-year review period. So from 2011 to 2016, we're going to look at the diversity efforts that have been engaged in and completed or are ongoing still at the University of Nebraska, Lincoln. A diversity effort is basically anything that's not a course. So it is that scholarship program. It is that research project that is for specifically historically underrepresented students or female students. It is that resource department that's specifically for students with disabilities. It is that lecture series that's on socioeconomic class and campus climate or climate change and racial and ethnic communities. It would be all of those things. Diversity courses are anything that is currently in your catalog year, undergraduate and graduate. We do not have a predefined definition of diversity, which we think would narrow down what we would look at. Instead, we have 75 search terms related to diversity, culture, and inclusion. These would be things like international, cross-cultural, cultural, diversity, socioeconomic class, gender, regional origin, language, nation, race, ethnicity, identity, transgender, sexual orientation, intersex, multiple genders, so many. I mean, we have all of these terms, and what we do is we use those terms to cast the net wide and scoop everything in, and then use our 25 analytical layers, 25 plus analytical layers, to really make sense of it. We have a litmus test that if the effort is for a diverse audience, if it's to a diverse audience, or a diverse demographic, or if it's about a diverse audience or an issue of diversity, that would go into our net. So for example, if we saw a flyer about a study skills workshop series for students, we may probe further, because even though on its face it doesn't look like it would be much of a diversity effort, lo and behold, we find out that that study skills workshop series is for first generation students, which we classify as a diversity issue, or is for historically underrepresented students, or for female students. That, because it's a demographic for a particular diverse audience or to a particular diverse audience, would meet our litmus test and would be considered a diversity effort. But we're pretty much looking at as many things as possible. Our mapping methodology involves a number of steps. I'm a firm believer that if you are hiring consultants to help, that it doesn't mean that the campus should be doing all the heavy lifting. So when we would have consultants kind of at our university in the past, I was always amazed at how much we had to prepare for them. So a 50-page report. And I'm like, why are we doing this? So for us, we want to do the heavy lifting. So the first step for us is, because we live in the Silicon Valley, three of us live in the Silicon Valley. I'm right around the corner from Facebook. I'm right around the corner from Google. We really utilize the search engine optimization and web scraping tools. So virtually every campus that really across the world has a digital footprint. We can scrape a lot of diversity efforts because most of your departments have individual websites. We can find accreditation reports. We can find documents related to courses. We can find a lot of things about your efforts and your events. We have already started a social media search with regard to UNL students and UNL faculty, as well as events that have happened at UNL that are on YouTube, Vine, and Vimeo. We've started actually in the last month and a half to watch those since 2011 all the way to 2016. And because we want to get a sense of what's going on there. What are those events really about? What are those efforts about? Once we've done that, and as we're doing that, we also want to have feedback from the UNL campus community. So remember, diversity mapping is not a campus climate survey instrument. What we do is look at the institutional record of diversity activity. Now, what we're doing is very complementary and enhances, if UNL chooses to do so, a campus climate survey instrument in the future, which I would recommend heavily, which is basically taking the temperature of how your students, your staff members, your faculty members, your administrators, your alumni feel about the campus in relation to inclusion and belonging. Those results of a survey and the diversity mapping actually work part and parcel together, okay? So this diversity efforts informational form and survey that I'm talking about now is really a mechanism where we open it up to you all at UNL about what are some diversity efforts that you're involved in? What are some diversity efforts that you know about? Because even though we can digitally scrape, I'd argue 80 to 90% of what already exists, there's still those informal, not very, maybe not publicized, maybe people keep it in their own department or the unit, those kinds of diversity efforts that we want to know about, if you would let us, because I think that having that knowledge is going to really help with regard to the diversity mapping. So we would want to put those through your campus IRB to make sure everything's legit, and then we can use that information from that survey, informational survey, with our web scrapings. We put all of that together in a spreadsheet, and we analyze it with 23, 25 plus analytical layers. We apply quantitative and qualitative methodologies to it, and then we actually do graphically map a series of maps of diversity efforts on your campus. And we use a program called Concept Draw. We do it for efforts and courses. And we do this cool thing with the courses where we're actually doing a little bit of an enrollment spreadsheet where we look at how many sections of every course have been filled, what were canceled, how many seats. So that way we can find out the courses that really emphasize race and gender. What's the exposure? How many students are taking those classes? How often are those classes offered? Because we're finding that if 45% of your catalog has diversity-related courses, but you're really only offering 10 to 12% on a regular basis, that gives a different piece of information. And of course, our main deliverable will be the key findings, and then ultimately, I'm going to recommend future action steps. And I'm really specific about what that is. I'll recommend possible really fruitful goals for a diversity strategy. These would be some really important areas to check on if you're going to do a campus climate survey instrument. I want to be as helpful as possible. For the courses, we're going to look at course offerings, we're going to look at learning objectives, we're going to look at syllabi and assignments. We also have an instrument that we'd love faculty to voluntarily participate in, which is basically asking faculty members about the 3 courses they regularly teach the most, and to what extent there's diversity content, diversity and inclusive pedagogical techniques, or diversity issues talked about in those courses, and just get their feedback. And again, that would go through IRB. And again, we would do a schedule analysis of the enrollments in particular courses, because remember, we're going to code every course in your catalog by looking at these different pieces of information, and then we're going to compare it with how many sections of each course were offered on a regular basis over the last 6 semesters. So it really gives us a sense of the diversity exposure. So let me just talk about 2 layers that we use, and this is called change order, and this is a diversity kind of strategy sequence. I created this as an homage to organizational change literature, which I'm a really big fan of, to get a sense of where are you as an institution or an organization with regard to diversity strategy. And it goes a little bit like this: first order, second order, third order, and fourth order. Most leaders ask me, what's the fastest way to fourth order and how much is it going to cost? And for me, this is really about an evolution. First order is when an institution has declared its commitment to diversity and inclusion. We love that. Those are mission statements, strategic plans, president's or chancellor's statements. We love that. We just get worried when a campus stays in first order for 30 years. We like first order to progress into second order, which is when that commitment that's been declared is demonstrated by some action, effort, or program. We love that. I'd argue that most institutions that we map are clearly, squarely in a second order phase. And then third order is taking that second order phase to the next level, which is about engaging in that action multiple times, linking it to a particular strategic goal, and then here's the kicker, making sure that impact is determined. So we often do things with regard to diversity and inclusion. I know that UNL has, but are you determining the impact of those efforts? Because we have a tendency to do something called activity-itis or project-itis, which is a chronic condition, I'd argue, that institutions and organizations do, where they engage in diversity efforts and the mere completion of those efforts for them equals success or achievement. And while it does in some way, we want to know what's the impact of that effort. How do you know this? And I don't care if that's quantitative or qualitative. Is it moving you in the direction that the campus wants to be moved into? And if it's not, are you changing course? If it is, are you continuing it and maybe ramping that up in a particular way? And then obviously at the very pinnacle of it is fourth order, which is when that effort's been engaged in, it's been determined for impact, but it's sustained, it's been fully resourced beyond one-time money, it's completely institutionalized and embedded in the organizational structure, so it transcends leadership, it transcends a person or a superhero that takes that on. So we're going to go ahead and identify the overall change order status that we think UNL is in, and we're actually going to go ahead and assign a change order to every diversity effort or program that we analyze. In terms of courses, I created a taxonomy called Delta, Diversity Engagement Learning Taxonomy Assessment. This is my homage to Bloom's taxonomy, which I was trained on and raised on in the academy, and I wanted one for diversity and engagement in the classroom. When I teach intercultural communication, there's a different kind of engagement cognitively and affectively when I teach Garrett Hofstadter's cultural patterns, or when I teach about the difference between a belief, attitude, and a value and a behavior when it comes to culture. That may take me a week. It may take some really intense conversations and lectures and discussion. But when I talk about things like microaggressions, implicit bias, and privilege, those things take me 2 weeks with a lot of discussion, with a very different sense of a cognitive and affective demand. So given that, I wanted to create a taxonomy that got different stage levels of engagement. And we would use this for every one of your diversity related courses that we analyze and map. It scaffolds up like Bloom's taxonomy. So if you're at a level 4, it subsumes level 3, 2, and 1. You see that level 3, 2, and 1 are the lower engagement levels. They're very important, but they're cognitively maybe less demanding and affectively less demanding. Knowledge, awareness, skills, interaction, advanced analysis. When it gets to level 5, 6, and 7, that's when you're actually getting the issues of power and structured inequalities and social issues like privilege and positionality. You can talk about diversity on your campus, but you may not connect it to power. And for us, that's what level 5, 6, and 7 do. So we're going to actually assign a delta level, the highest targeted delta level, even though it may not be fully actualized, the highest targeted delta level for each of your courses. And we're going to be able to tell you what your footprint is like on the curricular side. And so these are kinds of some images of what our maps look like. This is a really successful map and a really popular map in that we take your organizational structure and you actually can see what each unit and what each division is doing. Remember, our mapping is campus-wide. It's not just the academic side. It's student affairs, it's athletics, it's administrative and finance, it's all of your major divisions. That is the best way to kind of get a holistic portrait of what's going on your campus. We'll have a legend. I think we mapped the most 5 layers. You'll see that the blue balloons are really the homes or the divisions or unit offices. You see the longer, skinnier, white, muted white, blue balloons are the actual diversity efforts. And you see all these pretty colorful things in those balloons are our analytical layer legends. And this is one by theme that's really popular. And we're just going to try to give you as much analysis as possible. We identify a year with every diversity effort so that we can tell you kind of more of a time series analysis. How many per year, just because there's a dip down below, maybe you're becoming more strategic. So we're going to want to find out what happened between 2014 and 2015. We can actually make each of these layers a little bit more complicated. We can look at the top 4 definitions of culture and diversity by year. I guess that's the great thing for us as heavy layers is they're kind of like visual graphical crosstabs like in SPSS. If you wanted to know everything that's being done in student affairs on socioeconomic class status for undergraduate students and also female students, we're able to crisscross information and squeeze that out for you and tell you any other interesting pattern and sentiment analysis. We're going to look at things in alignment. Are things done university-wide? Are things done program-driven, where all the individual units are depleting their own individual budgets really to do the same kind of diversity effort? Is that the best way of doing things, or should it be cost-shared? How much are the students carrying the weight? We find that student organizations are really amazing at doing diversity efforts and programs, and not even fully funded programs, but things that they're doing in the regional community, things that they're doing for other students. So we have student initiated as a layer. We do change order. We're able to look at change order even by definition of diversity. We're able to categorize what the diversity effort is. Are they events? Are they clubs and organizations? And to be honest with you, we do find more events. A lot of events become the diversity related efforts at campuses. And what I do like that, because it's creating that intellectual knowledge about diversity and that interactional knowledge. But a lot of events are one-shot, one-offs that aren't connected necessarily to curricular or student learning objectives or aren't followed through in a continuous education program. So we're going to want to look at that. And just, what type of diversity is it? Is it based on social justice? Is it based on inclusion? Is it based on active diversity, which is the active appreciation of all cultural differences? There's just so much. One of my favorite layers is the framing of diversity in terms of what? We code 4 to 5 different constructions of diversity and culture per effort. So we're able to code an effort that it looks at gender, it looks at race and ethnicity, it looks at international, it looks at nationality, and it looks at language. And we're able to code that and tell you what aspects of diversity is UNL really focusing on, what aren't they focusing on, and why. And then other different kinds of layers, topical focus. There's a lot of layers in terms of, events in terms of recurring. Does it happen only one time? Which constituencies, target populations, staff members, faculty, employees, students, undergrad, graduate? How much are you doing on recruitment? What are all the different curricular analyses? By class level, by international or global focus, by spread of culture. All of these different aspects are what we're going to be looking at for your campus. So those are just some of the layers. Perspective taking. We have had very successful client trends. We have, I'd argue that these trends are a little bit later, but these trends have been for about 30 of our campus clients, which we still are wanting to kind of update. But the majority of our campuses, the vast majority of our campuses that we've worked with in the past have moved right into a diversity strategic plan. They've created a diversity infrastructure, and they've really moved into action. And we have really close relationships with all of our former clients over the last 8 years. Since the very first one, the very first client that we took on, and the very first technical community college in Wisconsin, we're still in conversation with them, checking on them. How you doing? Our success for us is based on an institution's continuity and their persistence and their pursuit of excellence in the diversity area. And we really believe that. I think when we see campuses maybe not moving into action as much, we're just going to stop doing this work. I've always said that, and I do mean that. But I'm happy to say that most of our campus clients absolutely move into action. And we have a relationship with you at UNL. We're vested in your success. And we share resources with our former campus clients and really work with them. And I actually get called back to kind of, can you look this over? What do you think? And I'm happy to do that. Here's the timeline. I visited you all a few weeks back as my first kind of campus visit to kind of explain the diversity mapping process. This is the slidecast that follows. We are starting to put everything together for you now, and we're going to submit that information to our liaisons there at UNL. We're going to start in late January to do the web scraping and the document analysis. Remember, we read thousands of documents per campus, and we don't want people to create something for us. If you already have a summary of your diversity efforts from your accreditation report or a unit report or a quarterly report, we can have that, and we can scrape that, and we could read that. That's our job, so please know that. We're going to launch the Diversity Efforts Informational Survey for your information about diversity efforts that you're involved in spring, and that's really going to be the heart of our data collection. And then hopefully early fall, I get to come back to beautiful Lincoln, Nebraska, share what we found and key recommendations and next steps, which I think is really, really important. That's a really important visit. What you can do is, I'd love for you all, when it gets approved by your IRB, if you can voluntarily participate in the Diversity Efforts Informational Survey to tell us about diversity efforts you're involved in. And if you're faculty, same thing. Once it gets IRB approved, if you can voluntarily participate, if you want, in the Diversity Pedagogy Instrument, we would absolutely love that. Thank you so much for your time. If you have any questions, or even if you want to tell me anything you think I should know or give me some context, there are hundreds of individuals that email me when we work with different campuses, and I keep everything private and confidential and just a one-on-one, even if you want to call me. My email is right there at rona@halualani.com. I'm excited that we are working with you. I'm excited that University of Nebraska-Lincoln is our first university in the state of Nebraska that we're mapping. So we are absolutely honored. Thank you so much for your time.